Wrote this song while crewing Aaron on a 100-mile foot race through the trails in the rain and mud. How about that? One hundred miles to go. 100 miles to go. Don't ask me why I do it, I don't know. One hundred miles by foot. 100 miles by foot. Don't ask me why I do it, I can't stay put. Rain is a coming, can't give a fit. Rain is a coming, can't give a fit. Don't ask me why I do it, but I am legit.
Hello, and welcome to, or welcome back to, the Runningpains podcast. My name is Aaron Saft, and it's just going to be a solo show today. So I'll be talking along the way here on primarily one topic. We're kind of straying in a few directions, but I had a listener, Jim Young, email me yesterday. It was. Which I'm recording this on Wednesday, June 24th. So he emailed me and had a few suggestions, and it was along the lines of what I was already thinking for a podcast, not necessarily the questions he asked. So I'm going to incorporate those as well, but I want to thank Jim for reaching out and asking me to include this in the podcast because they're a great question. So thank you, Jim. And as well to everybody else that has left comments or has emailed me, encouragement, comments, everything. I really do appreciate you taking the time to reach out and give me feedback. So without further ado, let's kind of get into today, which it's going to incorporate obviously what's going on now so far as races are coming back now. We're starting to see people putting on races, creating different it's definitely going to be different from what we're typically used to at races, which obviously it has to be. So I'm going to talk about what happened with Hellbender and our decision there, and just my gears moving forward. So But again, thank you, Jim, for your questions, which Jim's questions has to deal with, now that so many races have been postponed, and you may have already had stuff already originally signed up for in the fall, that they may be so close together. How do you deal with all that? So we're going to talk about that and training and recovery and all that good stuff, as well as preparing yourself for if some of these races don't occur and you still want to get something in. So we're going to touch all those bases today. And if you guys have questions after this, feel free to reach out. You can use the Facebook page, which is MR Runningpains Coaching, and plug questions in there. Ask away. I'll answer those questions. If other people have input, please, that's a good platform to do such. Also have a few new platforms I want to talk about and touch on. So we'll get into all that stuff today. So first, let me touch base on Hellbender and what's going on with Hellbender and what the decision was, because that was not an easy decision to make. But just to give a little backstory, I'm sure most of you know, Hellbender was originally scheduled for early April, and we were one of the first races that that faced. Do we cancel? Do we postpone? Do we even try to host the event? We were right on that precipice where things were starting to shut down, and then NC State, North Carolina State here, came down with their COVID guidelines, and we knew that we couldn't meet the guidelines, especially on such short-term notice, that we decided to postpone to the fall. Now, again, we were one of the first races in that time period to have to postpone, not knowing what would happen and having any foresight that there would be so many races impacted and following suit. Not that they were following what we did, but given their options, they postponed to the fall as well, which has made for an overcrowded fall, which in turn we rescheduled for November. And looking at how many races were rescheduled to the fall and how many races were already scheduled, we were having a hard time, with volunteers and what would happen with the volunteers and creating safety precautions for the volunteers. Obviously, there's so much uncertainty as to whether fall races can happen, given what we currently face. So, with so much unknown, with so many safety issues, not just with volunteers but with the runners, Hellbender draws over 25 different states to the western part of North Carolina. There aren't many lodging options around the race and the race start unless you want to drive a little bit. So we would be able to stay at the start, which is Camp Greer. Just so many questions. Is it even right to ask that many people to come to Western North Carolina? We couldn't change the start, and we couldn't have people doing wave starts just because of time cutoffs and the stipulations we face on the course. So it just became such a jumble, such a mess, and none of us were really comfortable with the situation given what COVID-19 has been doing and the projections for it. So our Running 28 Foundation just decided it was best to cancel now and not have everybody training for it and end up canceling it in the fall. So we canceled the event for primarily for safety and concern for not only our runners but our volunteers, for crews, pacers, everybody involved. We decided it was the best decision for all involved, and I'm really thankful to the runners. They have been very gracious and obviously disappointed, but in the same vein, they were also very happy that we did what we did, saying it so early, and very understanding. So I want to thank all of them, deeply for that. We have offered full refunds to everyone involved, including people that wanted to defer. We are just going to wipe the slate clean. We do not want anybody left out there with any money lingering. People are donating, so that the race can continue. I'm going to talk about that as well, but and we certainly appreciate that. But the reality is we don't know what 2021 is going to bring. And to that same point, I have resigned from the Running 28 Foundation, as well as race director for Hellbender. It was a tough decision, but as we've progressed through COVID-19, obviously my life has changed. I no longer I'm a owner operator at Footer X. That was my main gig and allowed me to do race directing as a side gig. And I don't have those liberties. I have to focus my attention now on coaching and my family, and and move forward with those. Not to say I won't ever race direct again, but I just knew that I don't have those times or that ability to devote to race directing, which obviously the races deserve. But yeah, it's just it was time for me to do what was best for my family, and so I'm stepping away. I am really pleased to announce that Will Jurgensen has agreed to take over the Solly Frosty Foot races. So Solly will continue. I want to thank David Faulkner for actually giving me that original opportunity. He handed that race over to me, gifted that race to me. So now I have turned it over to Will and his organization. And I hope to see that race continue going on. So Solly will continue. I have, obviously, I said I have resigned from the Runny 28 Foundation, but thankfully Megan Robinson, I am leaving the foundation in her capable hands, and they are going to seek a new race director for Hellbender, and hopefully get somebody in place so that the race can continue on. Obviously, it's not my wish that the race ends. I just knew that I could not carry on the capacity as race director. So I am happy to say that I am going to volunteer. I will be maintaining trails, and those of you that are interested in helping, I've got a lot of work to do on the Mountains to Sea Trail. My section is from 151 to the Mount Pisgah parking area. So those of you that know Shut-In, that is the finished section. So I'll be heading up there to clean water bars, as well as weed eat and to remove any trees that are up there. Definitely need help up there. I also manage a small pocket of national forest near my house in Mills River called Foster Creek. Also have the Thompson Creek Trail, which is in Pisgah National Forest, and I help manage 2 trails in Turkey Pen that the North Carolina Mountain Trail runners have adopted in Pounding Mill and Wagon Wheel Gap. So lots of work to be done. Aside from that, we also manage many of the trails over on the Hellbender course. So Victor Mariano always is over there working. So I intend to fully help him and volunteer for races themselves. I'm reaching out to RDs that have not only races in this area but throughout the Southeast or whatever, and agreed to go out and do whatever I can to help, whether it's captaining an aid station or whatever they need, course marking, whatever, however I can help. I'm going to continue to serve in that capacity. So big transition in my life, obviously. I can say that I am honestly, truly enjoying coaching. Right now, I am actually I'm working through a workshop with Chris Johnson. He's a physical therapist, and his cohort, Joel. Forgive me, Joel. I'm blanking on your last name right now, but another physical therapist, and they're putting on a clinic about coaching. So I'm working through that, as well as another coaching accreditation through the Arthur Lydiard Foundation. Arthur Lydiard was an amazing coach from New Zealand. He had some amazing athletes and Olympians, gold medalists that came through his program and his coaching style, which predominantly will be used for 5K to marathon runners. Very comprehensive, very complete. It's definitely a great methodology to coaching. Probably one of the best that I've taken so far. I've learned so much thus far. I've done about 9 hours of the course. We've got another 9 this weekend, and then we have a exam to get our coaching certification. But I love the ideas and methodologies behind it. There's scientific reason why the coaching philosophy and the coaching protocols are such. So I'm looking forward to implementing those with the athletes I have. that all said, I'm also joining the Protect Our Winners organization as a athlete advocate. Part of my mission as a person and a runner is to protect our outdoors, protect our trails, advocate for our outdoors. So I encourage you to go to their website, protectourwinners.org, and learn more about. They call themselves POW. And what you can do to help as well. I'm going to be spreading the word through my newsletter. If you're not getting my newsletter, you can sign up on my website, which is mrrunningpains.com, and learn more about these organizations that I'm going to talk about and what they do and how you can serve. So I'll be using social media as well to put things out there, just so people are aware, to help lobby and advocate for our outdoors to your congressman, and help decisions be made at a higher level through our state. So please check them out. And Ian Golden, famed New York runner and race director. Ian does so much. He's got quite the resume, but Ian has formed a new organization called Trails Collective, and I'm going to be speaking with Ian this evening about how I can join the Trails Collective and help spread the word about what he's trying to do in creating community throughout. It's a different platform. He uses the chat rooms and message boards that that we used to be using prior to social media. Some people aren't comfortable with social media platforms and how they're run, how they're organized, what they do, what they leave out. Ian is trying to make it more inclusive and spread the word about what's going on throughout the U.S. Again, Ian is New York based, but I'm going to try to advocate for the Southeast and create a collaboration so that we have more community and talk more about what's going on. People can ask questions and feel comfortable. And it'll be moderated so that there's it's no tolerance for any cyberbullying or anything to that regard. So check out the Trails Collective. You can Google them. Ian puts out a YouTube video each week about what's going on through trail running, and he's is very comprehensive. So enjoying that. Some really great people on there. But Trails Collective. Nice new great organization. So all right, so let's move on to the meat and potatoes of the episode here. So Jim wrote in again, Jim Young, thank you again, and asked me about now that we are seeing races again, and these races have been postponed, and you may have already signed up for other races. And we have this ginormous fall, right? Kind of late summer into fall, race upon race upon race. So how he asked, how do you schedule to make sense of all this? What do you do? Because obviously we don't want to over race. We want to get in and racing, obviously, but we don't want to over race. We don't want to put ourselves at higher risk of injury, burnout. These are all things that can be done if we're racing all the time, especially in longer distances. But I would say, just like you do for when you select races. Okay, let me give you an example here. I was supposed to run Kettle Moraine 100 miler, this month, June, and obviously it was postponed. It's postponed now till September. But I had already registered for Kettle Moraine, for Hennepin 100, which is October. Now, I am not the type of runner. There are runners out there that can go, month to month, and do 100 milers, in back-to-back months. And I'm not saying that it wouldn't I couldn't do it. I don't want to. I don't want to put my body through that. 100 miles it's still a very, very hard effort for me. Even if I, pace myself and tried to go easy, that's not the point of racing to me. And everybody has their different perspective. I'm not saying my perspective is the right one. So, if you want to accomplish that, that's a different thing. And it can be done. And we're going to talk about recovery and how to make recovery possible for efforts like that. But I'm giving you my perspective. In my perspective, I don't want to take away from either event, either Kettle Moraine or from Hennepin. So I have to decide which race I want to do in that window. So what it's come to, and it's not to say that either event's really going to happen, but I feel the likelihood of Kettle Moraine happening is higher than Hennepin, only because I feel by the time Hennepin rolls around in October, we're going to be on that precipice again of are events even going to happen? So if Kettle Moraine does happen and I'm allowed to travel and go, I would rather get that race in, knowing that potentially the Hennepin race might be canceled anyway, and so I'd rather get in that race than not get in a race at all. So, even though I think my goal this year, my big goal was to run Hennepin and try to run a fast time. But with the uncertainty, that's what I'm weighing. That's the balancing act here is, there's less likelihood that Hennepin's going to happen. So I'm going to put my focus on Kettle, and run Kettle. Now, just as we do and as we should do, in the fall, it makes sense to have, build-up races and races that lead into larger races if possible. So if you're looking at your schedule, let's say you have a marathon on the books. Now, obviously marathons, to the larger scales, like the big city marathons, some of them are still saying they're going to happen. It's highly doubtful that, they can make, enough stipulations that, they can get that many people to the starting line given everything that's going on. I know they're trying to fight for it. But there's no way, because they can't keep the streets open that long to create wave starts, to keep people that far apart. So it's just, it doesn't look good. I'm sorry to say, I don't mean to be a naysayer. I don't mean to be negative, but that's the reality. I don't foresee our majors happening. New York is holding out. Chicago is holding out. I don't see it. Smaller marathons, with, we're talking a few hundred people, just like trail races, have more potential for happening. So if you're signed up for one of them, they have more potential of happening. And, having lead up races to those, that's great. Whether you have, 2 10Ks and a half marathon, like maybe even 3 5Ks, a 10K, and then the marathon, try to keep your racing schedule where you have a little bit of recovery time prior to the marathon. Give yourself 3 weeks prior to the marathon of don't have any races in there, and then don't do too many back-to-back weekends. If you're doing 5Ks, having a back-to-back weekend's not that big of a deal, but obviously you're sacrificing some of your training because that's going to take a little bit away from your long run, and the long run is going to be probably one of the primary focuses of your program. So be careful of how much you're racing and how much you're putting in there. So far as the marathon goes, and if you have questions about it, for marathon training or anything like that, feel free to reach out. Now for ultras, on the other hand, whether you have a 50K is your fall goal, or 100 miler is your fall goal, you have to be careful with how many ultras you're kind of putting in there. The body, depending on you, the body, some people cannot go, and do, weekend after weekend of racing, Know your body, know what it can do, know how you feel. If 50K totally wipes you out, right? That's a sign that you need to recover from that effort before, allowing another effort behind it. When you're training for a 100-miler, I mean, in an ideal season, you can have a 50K in there. You can even have a 50-miler or a 100K in there. Those two, whether you choose 50-mile or 100K and a 50K. So, it's either 50K, 50-mile, and then 100, or 50K, 100K, and then 100 miles. You have to give yourself a little bit more room there than we would in the marathon. You don't want to have your 50-miler or your 100K 3 weeks prior to your 100-mile. It's just getting a little bit too close. So kind of learn to spread those out. You learn what your body needs to recover. But I know it's hard because you're probably signed up, just as I am. You're signed up for a lot that got moved to the fall. And I hate not to run Hennepin. That's tough. But the reality is, like, I know my body, and I know that doing those two efforts would not be good for my body. And in the long run, I'm thinking long term. Okay. We can't think of just this year. We have to remember next year is going to happen, and the following year is going to happen. So if your goal is to just run this year and be done with running forever, that's one thing. But if you're in this for the long haul, like I am, be kind to your body so that it can be kind to you going down the road and racing down the road. There are sacrifices that we can make this year. Obviously, we've made a ton already. And if we have to make sacrifices within the racing world, so be it. Give up some of those races to be able to do more in the future. There's no sense in putting yourself beyond that threshold where, it's going to take you months to recover just because you wanted to get in, some races that you signed up for. So be kind to yourself, understand your limitations. If you feel that you're going to recover and you're going to be okay, if you're going to, do things, that we're going to talk about here next, to try to recover and get things in, go into an event with the understanding that, your body might not have it. It's like, even though you're trying, you have to be okay with that. And, just be all right, be prepared for that. I don't want you to go in with the mental attitude that I'm not going to make it. I'd rather you go in with the mental attitude that, you're going to make it to the finish line and finish your event. But, at the same time, have that forgiveness for yourself. Give yourself that grace that, things don't go right on a given day, just like any race, you may go into a race fresh and it just may not be the day. I've had those days too. And, just be okay with that. It's what you're given that day. And that's okay. It is what it is. We have to be grateful that we have the opportunity and accept, the result of it. So, Jim's next question was, how do we optimize recovery? And that's a great question. All right. So, let's say that you get in, one of your races. So what are things that you should do, directly following that event? Okay. So, the one thing that I will say that you can do, throughout your training, this is, even before racing, do it now and start getting used to this, is recording your resting heart rate. So when you wake up, a lot of our watches will give us that data, what your resting heart rate was when you were sleeping, over the night. So you wake up and get your resting heart rate, record it wherever you record things, whether it be on Strava, put a note on Strava. If you use Training Peaks, put a note in Training Peaks as to what your resting heart rate was. Other ways you can do it if you can't figure out how to do it on your watch is just the old, find your pulse on your neck, and count for 1 minute. And get your resting heart rate as soon as you wake up, before your feet hit the ground, before you even sit up. Don't sit up yet. That elevates your heart rate. So while you're laying down, take your heart rate, record it, and then track it. That's going to be the big thing. You're going to watch your heart rate. The morning after your race, it's going to be elevated just because of the effort that you put in. You're going to have an elevated heart rate. And usually it's going to take, just like we say in recovery, for every 10 miles that you raced, it's going to take 1 day of recovery for every 10 miles you race. So in other words, if I raced 50K, it's going to take me about 3 days, roughly 3 days, for my resting heart rate to get back down to normal. So monitor it. That's the big thing is monitor how much that heart rate is coming down, because you don't want to do anything prior to that heart rate getting back to normal. Now, when I say nothing, I don't want you running hard. In other words, this one of the courses that I'm taking right now with Arthur Lydiard, they talk about like after a marathon, like you do 1 day per mile that you do not do anything at the marathon effort that you just did or harder. So for 26 days, you're not supposed to go any harder than the marathon pace you just ran. Now, when we talk about running, I'm going to say 50 miles and longer, I don't think that rule applies as much because now we're talking totally different paces and efforts and heart rate zones and thresholds. So what I suggest is that you take that day per 10 miles raced and use that as your guidance. So when you get through, let's say you did the 50 miler. By day 5, your resting heart rate should have come back down. Can you do anything in the intermediary? Of course. The day after you have a hard effort, a hard race, or just your whatever you're doing, your 50K, 50 mile, whatever it is, I like an active recovery hike. I usually plug in active recovery hike. 2 to 3 miles, just getting those legs moving, getting the blood pumping, getting your legs flushed out. Getting those sore muscles loosened up. So, the day after, go for a hike, walk your dog, whatever. Just go out, take a hike with your significant other. Get out there. You can go, hike on the trails, whatever. Get out in the woods. I mean, don't do anything strenuous. I'm not asking you to go climb a mountain. I'm saying get somewhere where you can just loosen up a bit. 2 to 3 miles, really simple, really easy. That will help flush out the system. Okay. After you race, it's vital that you start eating, and make your calories count. A lot of times, we turn to, a pizza and beer and, hamburgers and all this comfort food that, in reality, they're calories, but they're not necessarily good calories. So make sure your calories count, especially if you're trying to recover for a race that's coming up quickly. So you've had a race and then you've got another one coming up. Make those calories count. Put in good foods. Get your veggies in. And a good source of protein. So you want to get your carbs, your proteins, just let that vitamin, the vitamins and minerals that your body needs to recover, antioxidants, eat your fruits, and vary the colors of everything so that you're getting in all sorts of nutrients. But make those calories count. I'm not saying you can't have a burger or pizza or beer or whatever, I'm not saying that. It's, just don't let that following week, lead to comfort eating. It's okay for after the race to kind of, indulge a little bit, celebrate. I get that. But make sure that you're doing other things to help your body recover, in the regards to your calories. Other things is hydration. Keep drinking fluids. And by fluids, I mean, your waters, if you prefer to add some Nuun or something like that for, some electrolytes and such, especially if you feel like you lost a lot of electrolytes, that's totally fine. But rehydrate, keep hydrating the days thereafter, and keep monitoring that resting heart rate. So other things that you can do, as I said, the day after when you go for active recovery hike, like the next day, maybe you take a day off. Your body needs some rest. So give it, a day off, especially if that heart rate's high. You wake up that second morning after the race and your heart rate's still really high, just take a day off. Let yourself recover. Maybe get a massage. If your muscles can tolerate it, help again flush out those muscles, break up any adhesions within the muscles. But if you can get a massage, you might even want to schedule that prior. And again, if you're super sore and don't feel you can tolerate the massage, just see if you can move it. And then you can start some cross training. That might entail some easy spinning on a bicycle. Just 30, 45 minutes, just kind of loosen up the legs again, see how they feel. If you're used to cycling, you may go a little further. It could be rowing, swimming, aqua jogging, any of those things that are low impact. Obviously, we don't want to hammer the legs any further than what they already are, but cross training at that point is awesome. So use cross training to your benefit there. That way, you're getting some exercise. Obviously, you want to keep the heart rate low. You want to stay down in probably zone 2, just 2 to 3. I would say at a max to if you're looking at your heart rate, so that it doesn't get too high because we don't want a hard effort. So use your cross training wisely. And then sleep. Sleep is going to be super important during this time period. So, get your sleep. 7 to 9 hours a night is great if you can manage it. You may have to make some sacrifices in order for yourself to get that kind of sleep, but sleep is going to be super essential in helping your body recover during that time period. So, those are all things I would say for optimizing your recovery. And then pacing. Now, what Jim was asking is that if you have event upon event, should you ease up your pace, to be able to accomplish if you're going to try to do all these races. And I would say it would be a resounding yes. You're going to have to ease up your paces, just to make sure that, the body is okay, because you may go into it and start out easy and then recognize that you feel okay. Let's go back to, let's say 2016, for myself. 2016, I've talked about it before, big year for me. 350Ks in February, March, April. And then I had 250 milers in a 2-week period. And then about I think it was like 3 or 4 weeks later, I had a 75 miler. And then in the fall was October was the Grindstone 100. And then November was the Mountain Masochist 50 miler, which I think was 5 weeks after Grindstone. And then 4 weeks after that, I had the Hellgate 100K. So huge year for me. I'd never run 100 miles. I'd never run 75 miles prior to that. 50 miles was the highest I'd ever run. And we're going to talk about things that can help you prepare for stuff like that. Obviously, I was doing the B series, but I also loaded it with Cayuga 50 miler, which was the U.S. Championships, and then directly following that, Manitou's Revenge 50 miler. I just threw that one in there because I'm an idiot. And then I wanted to kind of get in something longer prior to Grindstone because I had never run over 50 miles, so that's where I threw in the Canadian Death Race 125K. So, it was a big year with focus on recovery. And what recovery looked like was the week after each event was, pretty much complete rest. I just, took a down week, and towards maybe 4 or 5 days after the event, I would just go for an easy shakeout jog. I'd do some hiking and walks up to that point, and as my legs start to feel recovered, I would get into running again and build back slowly. We kind of went after it race after race. I trained, and I guess we're kind of getting into conditioning. That was his other question, is like, what do you do for conditioning, especially right now? So I did a lot of high intensity we'll say max VO2 style workouts, as well as lactic threshold, and did things to kind of create the upper end of my system so that, I was in really good shape. Now that's really difficult to sustain for the entire year. So what we did was we did some really good marathon training for the spring, which led into my 50Ks. Now, in between the 50Ks, I only had a few weeks in between each 50K. So, we would just kind of do some maintenance workouts, which would be kind of more of the, lactic threshold style workouts, which lactic threshold, that's basically maybe 80% effort, and that's intervals that would go roughly, let's just say 10 to 30 minutes of intervals with half the recovery time in between intervals. So anyhow, those were kind of maintenance workouts that we kind of interspersed between the 50Ks so that I maintained a good level of fitness. But leading up to those, we did a lot of good marathon training. That's what led into my 50Ks. For the 50 milers, we upped my mileage a little bit, and again, it was just kind of keeping everything in moderation so that I wasn't overtaxing the system. Max VO2 intervals can be very difficult and taxing on the system. So the body can only train in one system. Like, we're taking the max VO2 system for instance, for 4 to 5 weeks, 6 at max, in which, it can stay working consistently on that system before the adaptations no longer take hold, because you've worked that system for so long, it needs a break and to work on something else. So, it's, you have to mix those up every now and again, or work on the system, and then work on a different system. So, we kind of sprinkled in the middle there. We took some max VO2 with some lactic threshold, and kind of mixed the two systems. And then in the fall, it was really just recovery. Because I already had a busy year, obviously, with all that racing. So the fall, it's just recover, make sure that I maintained a good aerobic base, getting in my long runs. But it was amazing. I definitely, after Grindstone, I took second at Grindstone, and then I really felt good at Mountain Masochist. And it was one of those races where I just kept waiting for the bonk. I just kept waiting for the crash to happen, and it didn't come, which was amazing to me. I maintained such a good aerobic base throughout the year that I was good. I carried myself through that. So if I were to say, what's important to do right now is work on your aerobic base. And that's basically just getting in conversational paced runs where you can speak to a running partner, and just getting out there and having time on your feet. So it's I'm not saying you have to go out there and do long run after long run. It's really just becoming comfortable with that time on your feet, whether it's an hour or 2 hours. You'll notice that if you're working on your aerobic base, that your pace will actually get faster because you're creating more ATP within the system. This might be getting a little too geeky for you, so I apologize. But doing aerobic style runs where you're running at a conversational pace is probably the best thing that you could do right now. If you don't have any races coming up that you're preparing for, that would be my suggestion, is just working on your aerobic base. If you want to kind of throw some things in there to, so you don't get so bored, you can do some hill repeats. Those are good, low risk of injury. You can do those at a good sustained effort. You can probably work up to 90% of max heart rate on those, as well as playing with some fartlek. Fartlek is, for those of you that don't know the term, it is speed play, and it's indeterminate intervals. That's the key to these, is that you're not doing a specific amount of time or distance. It's just you go fast for whatever you feel like, and then you recover at whatever pace you want for however long you want. And then you do it again. You pick up the pace. It may be a different pace for a different length, but it's just you're playing with it and seeing how you feel at the different paces. It's always good, if you can do it on trail, rolling terrain, break it up, uphills, downhills, flats. It's fine to do on the roads, obviously, but if you can do those on the trail, that's a great little workout to kind of throw in. I know it's so bizarre to us to not like say, well, I'm doing 2-minute intervals today. In fartlek, you don't even worry about it. You don't even have to look at your watch. It doesn't matter what pace you're running. It doesn't matter how far you're running or for how long. It's just your idea, however you're feeling at that moment in that time. It kind of helps you find that flow state because you're not worried about anything else. You're just going and listening to your body. I was kind of on a side note. I was thinking about flow. I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about flow. And I recognized that, if I'm out running and I don't have music and I don't have a podcast on, I find the flow state easier because I'm not distracted by anything, especially if I don't have anything on my mind. If I go out for a run and there's nothing on my mind, I've left that to-do list at home, I can find that flow state so much easier because I'm in the moment. I'm in, the moment with what I'm doing and my body is just, moving in space and I don't have to worry about anything else. That's where I find flow. So if you can find that moment for yourself, it doesn't have to be meditative. It's just losing yourself in the moment and letting yourself go and let everything else go. You'll find that flow state a lot easier. So far as pacing goes, back to my story here, Mountain Masochist, as I said, I just kept waiting for it. I got to 30 miles and I was like, dang, I still feel good. And I just started picking it up. And I was like, man, I'm feeling good. My nutrition was pretty dialed in. Things were just clicking. And I was like, yeah, I just ran a 100-miler 5 weeks ago, but I'm feeling like this is probably one of the best 50-milers that I've ever run. So anyhow, it's not to say that, you should pace it differently. You should start easier, right? Allow yourself to start slower and see how you feel. Let some of the race go by. And if you're still feeling good, then allow yourself to start picking it up. You have to learn what your body has for you that day. And that's the, I guess that's the key to running is what is your body going to tolerate today? How much can it give you on that given day? So that's my advice for pacing, and as well for conditioning. Right now, it's always a good time to work on your aerobic capacity. So do those aerobic runs, build up the time on your feet, and how fast you can do that time on your feet without elevating that heart rate. See if you can keep your heart rate at the same beats per minute as you did last week, but go faster. That's how you can tell your system is getting stronger. You're getting fitter. Okay? So I want to thank Jim Young again for all of that. The second part of this, what I had to talk about, is something that I've been working on with my own research for this FKT that I'm about to attempt. So I've been talking about July 11th. I'm going to go after the fastest known time on the Art Loeb Trail, which for those of you that aren't familiar, it's a 30-mile trail here in Western North Carolina. It's got somewhere roughly between 9,000 to 11,000 feet of gain. It's the front end, up to probably about mile 17 is heavily loaded with the climbing. Very difficult up front. And so we went out this past weekend, myself and my friends Dave and Sheridan, and kind of did a little bit of recon to see the course, practice with my gear, practice, see everything. So I kind of wanted to talk about what things I do to to make sure that you can have the most success, not only in your races, but if you're just going to do a long route or an FKT. It doesn't necessarily have to be an FKT. You just want to go do a route. So I'm going to give some examples as I go through here of things people did and used to success. And I would start with a simple Google search. Look at Google and see what pops up and what information you can get from a simple Google search. And so, once you do that and kind of pull up information and see what you can find, on the route itself, another good place to turn to would be the ranger station. So whatever ranger district that you're going to run this route in. If it's multiple, then you might have to obviously reach out to others, but see what information they have for you. Some questions to ask. The ranger station would be, hey, are the trails all open? Do you have access to all points of this course? Or are there hazards that you should be aware of, such as forest fires or multiple downed trees? We under the Pisgah Ranger District, where I live and where I run majority of my runs, and do a lot of trail work, we have just been given the green light as of this week to use weed whackers to kind of take down the weeds that are on our sections. We still can't use chainsaws yet. So there are a lot of down trees, and we're still not allowed to access those trees and cut them out. So it's good to know what's going on, especially with all the rain that we have had here. Are there any floods or any dangers of high waters? Ask the rangers all these questions to find out informations about the routes or anything they may know of to help you. Some routes have people have created websites for. So see if you can find websites to find information on the route or especially races. Read race reports and blogs. Some routes that people do, their races are on there, so you can find race reports and blogs with all sorts of information for you. About especially about access points for where crew and family can meet you to resupply and such. So read those. Facebook groups. There are a zillion Facebook groups out there, and some, if we think of Rim to Rim to Rim in the Grand Canyon, they have their own Facebook group where people can ask questions. So look and see if there's a Facebook group that would pertain to that, or if there's a Facebook group in the area that could provide area information. Here in Western North Carolina, we have two good Facebook pages that are great resources to anybody that is coming to the area. One is obviously the North Carolina Mountain Trail Runners group. The other being the Western North Carolina Trail and Ultra page. Those two groups are great informational pages. Anything that I kind of talk about, I will obviously try to create links in the show notes so that you can reference. But you look up those Facebook groups, see what you can find. I'm itching to get over to the UK and run the Bob Graham round. They have their own Facebook group as well. So it's great. There's speaking of all that stuff, there's also books. Don't forget about those type of resources. There's obviously, like when people do the Appalachian Trail, there's a ton of books out there with so much information. There's also books on shorter trails, like the Foothills Trail, the Mountains to Sea Trail, the sectionals of the Appalachian Trail. There's just look up your resources for books as to what information you can find, because you can find all sorts of data that people have already done, and it's at your fingertips in books. So do your research there as well. Speaking of the North Carolina Mountain Trail Runners Club, you could look for local clubs within the area to reach out to and ask questions and see if there's people that can help you through those clubs. Trail Run Project. It's such a great resource for trail information, for routes. A lot of routes are posted on there, and it will give you so much data so far as elevation, gain, descent, notes. So use Trail Run Project. It's a free app RAI puts out there. Strava. If you're on Strava, you can use Strava entry. Strava entries of people that have run the routes. So look at Strava data. You can also see if you can borrow somebody's GPX data and upload that to Trail Run Project and create the route yourself. And upload that to Gaia, another great app, so you can follow along on your phone. And then there's always the great trusty local paper maps. In our area, we have a great local company called Pisgah Trail Maps, or Pisgah Maps, and they do some fantastic work on stuff that we don't typically see on the National Geographic maps. I'm very familiar with the National Geographic maps, but see if there's local maps that you can use to research. To research your project, whether it's a route or a FKT or a race. So. And then, with all of these, things to kind of look for and research is, as I kind of talked about before, you want to find out where you can have crew access points. So if you're doing this supported, obviously, and you want your crew to access you at certain points, see where they are and how far along the route they are, so you know how much to carry in between points. Look and see if there are water access points, whether it be by stream or creek, or if where springs are. Those are always good things to know offhand, where they are, and what you should be looking for, especially if they're not obvious. You have to go off the trail slightly to find them. We talked about hazards, knowing if there's been landslides or fires, down trees, flooded waterways, etc. Know if there are hazards or the potential for hazards. And then, a good thing to do would be to find a comparable runner that to yourself, if you know somebody that's done the route, and kind of see how long they took, and if they have the information of how long various sections took them, just so you have a time estimate and you can give your crews a timetable. And then, are there tricky spots along the course? There may be wilderness on your route, and if there is, it may not be marked. So know that those sections, and if you need to know specific turns without course markings, which way to go. So the Art Loeb Trail, which I am doing, it does go into wilderness. And when I first did this trail, the internet was not what it is today, and there wasn't as much resource out there. But I did find a picture of which way to go in the wilderness, so that I didn't take the wrong turn. So it's good to make sure you understand all parts of the route, with now being able to upload GPX files and have your dot follow the route, and if you can see if you get off route, that's such a tremendous help. So all right, now what to do. So what to do in preparation for your route. And now, if you live near the route, it's always great to practice the route, just as I did this past weekend. Get out there, see tricky sections, get a good feel for the hard climbs, kind of take some mental pictures to remind yourself, okay, this is this is going to be this long of a climb. I always go by how much elevation gain I have on my watch. So I kind of remember, okay, at this point I'm going to be here. It's going to take, this much more gain to get to this point and this much more gain to get to this point. So I always go off of vertical gain. And then practice with your gear. This weekend I brought out my pack. I got to the trailhead and was meeting my friends. My wife drove me out, and I forgot my water bottles. I couldn't believe it. Could not believe that I forgot my water bottles. But thankfully, each of them had one spare one they could let me have. But it meant using the rest of my electrolytes that I was going to plan on using later. So mental error on my part. One big thing I'll say is, if you're going to practice with your gear, create a checklist that you can use each time and carry it each time so that you're used to the weight of the pack. That was dumbest mistake on my part. I had everything else minus the water bottles, which were obviously two of the more important pieces that I needed for the day. So don't make the mistake I did. Have a checklist. Make sure you have everything before you leave. I got up nice and early just to make sure I didn't leave anything behind, and I still did. So make yourself a checklist, and then again, practice with your gear. And I'm going to talk about what gear you should probably carry with you on longer efforts in a little bit. While you're out there, practice your nutrition and hydration plan. For whatever reason, this past weekend, my stomach went wrong. I don't know what it was. It could have been the dinner the night before. We had bean enchiladas, and so it was peppers and beans, and I just don't know. I don't think it was sitting right. It just, my stomach turned. I just was nauseous, and I didn't have anything on me to kind of try to battle the nausea, but it got really bad. I think I had burritos for lunch too, so I think I just had too many beans the day before, and that and the heat, I think it just was a wrong concoction, and my stomach just was not right. So when you have a big effort like that, don't be a dummy like me, and have something normal the night before for dinner, as well as something normal for breakfast. I didn't realize it, but I had used vanilla oat milk in my cereal, which I'm not used to. I usually just use it in my coffee, and it definitely had a different taste to it. So, that could have been it too. I'm not sure. So too much different, the day before a practice run like that, which again, another mistake. So, mental notes that I made to myself. It's always good to say, what did I do wrong? What can I do better? And, what did I do right? So those three questions, always good to reanalyze what's going on. Let's see. So, this is something I touched base on earlier. Be okay if you don't succeed in the first try. That day, Saturday, it's definitely not the preparatory run I wanted leading into an FKT. It did not leave me, confident. I know I had done a really hard workout, 3 days prior, and I knew I would feel it in my legs. My legs actually felt pretty good. It was more my stomach that flipped. I made it through. Obviously, we went almost 20 miles, and I was okay, but it definitely, I suffered at the end there, but it's not always going to go right. And I looked at it and I said, well, I trust my training. I trust what I'm doing. I trust myself, and I'm not going to make those same mistakes in the future. So, just be aware of that. And then practice with your crew and pacers. Those two guys, all goes right, they're going to be out there with me on FKT day. So, I was kind of letting them know what I wanted to do, what I wanted to accomplish. My wife is going to be crew, so she was up at Black Balsam. She was getting ideas for how long it takes to get to various points. So let them practice as well. And also, prior to the route, be it a long route, meet with your crew and pacers to discuss your expectations and what you want and backup plans and all that kind of stuff. Make sure everybody's on the same page and knows their roles and what's expected of them. So, some safety items. I carry my cell phone. This FKT, I don't. I hope it's not going to take me very long. But if you are planning a longer one, it's always good to have a backup battery with your cord for your phone. Especially if you're using GPS like Gaia. You can definitely drain the battery. You can also, if you have reception, get weather updates. So, all good things to use your cell phone for, but, bring a backup battery with a cord. I also have a Garmin Mini InReach for GPS, which is going to be kind of my spot tracker, if you will. To backup, it's going to be backup data. So I'll have my watch and the GPS data from the Garmin InReach Mini, but I can also use the InReach Mini for communications, getting messages out to my wife, just in case I don't have reception. So The InReach Mini does work with your phone. You can actually type the message on your phone and then use the Garmin as a as a modem, if you will, to send messages. So really handy device. The Garmin Minis are super small, and they're great to have. See if you can rent one or borrow one from a friend if you don't. My friend just borrowed mine for the SCAR attempt. He ran SCAR and finished, he was able to get messages out to his wife and let them know how he was doing. So just a good peace of mind to have those type of devices. It's always good to have a water filter, whether that be a Life Straw or a Katahdin, bottle filter, or a Sawyer Mini, whatever device you want to use. Always great to have a water filter. Thank goodness one of my buddies was carrying one this past weekend because, as I said, I forgot my bottles, and we had a Katahdin with us, and I was able to refill. And then if you're doing a longer effort, some things that I might suggest is flint steel and a little bit of tinder. You can always create a fire if things go wrong and you need to be stationary for a while and stay warm. So those flint steel, they'll always create a spark, and then some tinder just to get things going. A small first aid kit is always great to have. Not only if for yourself, but if you're doing something with others and somebody gets hurt, it's always good to have a first aid kit on hand. Small one, some small essentials in it. I think maybe that's a YouTube video is a running first aid kit and what you should pack. An emergency whistle. A lot of the packs are actually coming with emergency whistles now, but if you don't have one, a small emergency whistle is always great, and an emergency blanket. Just a Mylar blanket to keep you warm, just in case the weather turns and you're stuck and you're getting cold. It can also if worst comes to worst, if search and rescue is coming to get you, the Mylar blankets are very reflective. So if they're looking for you, shining lights and stuff, that will be really reflective and very visible. So all good things to carry, especially on longer efforts. That all said, Jim, I hope I answered all your questions. If anybody else has any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm always here as a resource. Glad to answer. My email is runningpains@gmail.com, and my social media, you can reach me either through my personal Facebook page, which is just Aaron Saft, or MR Runningpains Coaching Facebook page. I am MR Runningpains on Instagram, and Aaron Saft on YouTube. Aaron Saft on Strava. You can always link up with me there, ask questions. They're all great platforms to reach out. So, if you have other topics you want me to touch on the podcast, please do. We got some more guests coming up, so you won't have to hear me drone on podcast after podcast. But I hope this was super helpful. Look forward to hearing from you. If you would, please like it on iTunes, subscribe, leave a comment if you would. It helps others see it, and share it. That would be great. I sincerely appreciate your time, guys, and I hope you're all well through all of this, and look forward to seeing everybody out on the trail sometime soon. Take care.